Hi, welcome back to another week of virtual encounters in John's Gospel. This week we're in John chapter 11, and what I'd love you to do, if you haven't already, is please go away and read it for yourself. Because in this video we are going to be walking through the story together, and we're going to have to go at quite a pace. So it'd be really great if you could read it yourself. We'll unpack it together now, and then in buzz groups later on Zoom, we will apply it. We'll see what it means for us today, what God has to say to us today, how we apply it. So grab your Bibles, keep them open. John chapter 11, and let's set the scene of this incredible story. Verse 1, now a man named Lazarus was ill. We get the picture pretty quickly that it's serious, and also that this is a friend of Jesus's. His sisters, Mary and Martha, send word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is ill. Clearly he's a close family friend. And the reason that they're sending word to Jesus, I guess, could be twofold. They might just be assuming that Jesus will want to say his goodbyes. Lazarus is about to die, and that Jesus would want to say goodbye to his friend. I guess also that they might be harbouring hopes that Jesus could do something about it. That if he got there in time, he could stop Lazarus from dying. But the most extraordinary thing unpacks over the next few verses. Because first of all, Jesus promises that this illness will not end in death, verse 4. And then verse 6, 5 and 6, we get this astonishing sentence where Jesus, because he loved them, Mary, Martha and Lazarus, because he loved them, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. It's bizarre. What is going on? I mean, the disciples are baffled. We get the hint that maybe they thought he was avoiding being stoned. Maybe he was just waiting for Lazarus to get better and sleep it off. We just don't know. They don't know what's happening. But Jesus gives us 2 clues, 2 so that's in these conversations that just help us to what he's up to. Look down with me at verse 4. This illness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. There's our first hint. So that God's Son may be glorified through it. And then verse 15. For your sake I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. Now, do you remember John's aim for his book in John chapter 20, verse 31? These things are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. See, it isn't just John's aim. It is Jesus' aim. Jesus knows what is about to go down. He waits a couple of days so that he would be glorified, that the Son of God would be glorified. May be given the honour and the glory he deserves. And so that you may believe. Everything that is about to happen is so that Jesus may be glorified, and so that the disciples, those around, that Mary, Martha, Lazarus, that we today might believe. So let's get into it. Let's have a closer look at this encounter between Jesus and the sisters who come face to face with Jesus. Now, Lazarus, the brother, has been dead for 4 days. You can imagine the painful conversations that have gone on in that time after he died. with an empty seat at the dinner table. Maybe it would have gone something like this.
I can't believe he's gone. Why didn't he come? I know if Jesus had been here, he would have been able to heal him. I know it.
Why didn't Jesus come?
I don't know.
If Jesus had been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died.
And those words just hang in the air. You can imagine the pain stored up in the hearts of Mary and Martha. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. They both meet Jesus with the same words. And Jesus treats them both very differently. Verse 21, Martha hears that Jesus has arrived and she goes out to meet him. It's hard to say, isn't it, whether it's a kind of warm welcome or a bit confrontational.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
She's confused. There's anger, there's grief. There's all sorts of emotion going on. And yet she adds something, doesn't she?
But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask.
She's clearly seen enough of Jesus to know that anything is possible. But even with Jesus' powerful, bold words in verse 23, your brother will rise again, she's still not sure he means now. I mean, I know he'll rise again on the last day. You know, when the new creation gets ushered in and everyone that was dead is made alive. I know he'll come back then, but for now, he's gone. You're too late. If only you'd been here, Jesus. So Jesus ramps it up again with some more astonishing words. Verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Well, I mean, now Martha is hooked, right? Now she's really intrigued. She's excited. Her heart is pumping. Little does she know that her brothers would be too in a few moments' time. Yes, Lord, I believe. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world. It's almost as though she's talking to herself, reminding herself of who she's talking to. She's got it, or something of it. She believes. She's come to Jesus looking for hope. But even now, I know that God will do whatever you ask. Please let that be true. She's come looking for affirmation, and she's got it. I am the resurrection and the life. It's an astonishing moment and an astonishing promise. Mary's different though. Mary stays inside. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Jesus wants her to come to him. As though he wants her to step out in faith, to show some trust in him. Now, whereas Martha was fairly steady, it seems, perhaps she was the more resilient of the two sisters, hard to say. But Mary is broken. She is devastated by the death of her brother. Verse 33, 32, as soon as she sees Jesus, she falls at his feet, weeping. She's broken. And as she weeps, the same words are spoken.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died.
See, Mary isn't hoping, is she? She's not looking for affirmation. She's crushed. And so Jesus doesn't answer her in the same way that he did with Martha. He joins her in her suffering. He meets her where she is at. He gives her what she needs. He weeps with her in her sorrow. Now, I guess at that point you might go, well, hang on, Jesus weeping? I mean, he knows he's about to raise Lazarus. He's promised that this wouldn't end in death. Why is he crying? Shouldn't he be confidently drawing her along, saying, no, it's fine, look what I'm about to do? It is one of the most wonderful things in all of the Gospels with Jesus, that even though he's got absolute power, and even though he's got sovereign control over every situation, and even though he knows how it is all going to end, his emotional response is never diminished by those things. Every time he reacts rightly, deeply, with raw emotion. I mean, it would be wrong, right, to be unmoved by such evil. He's painfully aware of the grief and the sorrow and the pain that Lazarus' death has brought on these sisters, upon himself. He grieves with Mary. Now, Mary stayed behind. Maybe she wasn't ready to talk to him. Maybe she found it hard. Her grief was just too much for that moment. She needed someone to come alongside her. She needed a grieving companion. And Jesus provided that. He was that. He wept with her. And it's striking, isn't it? Lord, if only you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. That's quite a strong sentence to meet Jesus with. But Jesus doesn't rebuke them. He doesn't challenge either of the sisters. Instead, he meets them with what they need. Responds to both of them with the utmost compassion, gracious kindness, in just the right way that both of them needed him to. Beautiful love. But it is striking that it doesn't end there, does it? Even some of the people around have the same question. Wasn't this the guy who opened the eyes of the blind? Surely he could have done something about this. Could have stopped Lazarus from dying. But remember John's aim in chapter 20, verse 31. These things are written so that you may believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing him, you may have life in his name. And earlier in this chapter, as Jesus promises that these things would happen so that they would see God's glory, the glory of the Son of God, and that so that you may believe. In fact, Jesus reminds them himself of that. Verse 40. Didn't I tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? It has all been building towards this point. This is the crescendo of this story so far, where the glory of God would be revealed. And so Jesus sets the scene and tells them to roll away the stone. But the Lord, says Martha, he'd been in there 4 days. It's going to reek. I don't know how much you know about dead bodies, but I did my research, and after 4 days, the internal organs are decomposing, and the body is starting to produce some pretty disgusting smells. So she is right, it would have reeked to open that tomb. I mean, just imagine being there. A remote village, just Bethany, in the middle of nowhere, and there's crowds of people gathered round for the funeral of Lazarus, the family and friends and professional mourners, I suppose. And Lazarus has been in the tomb, dead, for 4 days. That's since Monday. Okay? And Jesus turns up and he says, roll the stone away. Lazarus, come out. I mean, what would your response have been? I mean, I think, what's he doing? I mean, for real? Lazarus, come out. Who does he think? Whoa. No way. It's Lazarus. I mean, Lazarus was dead and now he's there. He's alive. He's walking. Well, except he probably wasn't walking because he was wrapped in grave clothes, right? And head to toe, and they probably weren't expecting him to use his legs again, so he'd have been falling over, I imagine. But just picture the scene as Lazarus stumbles forward and Jesus has taken off the grave clothes. I mean, in one sense, yeah, but it goes deeper, doesn't it? Because Lazarus is no longer dead. He doesn't need the grave clothes anymore. He needs the clothes of the living. He's not a zombie. He's not temporarily resuscitated. He's alive. In the next couple of chapters, Lazarus holds a dinner party for Jesus. I mean, that's kind of the least you could do, right? Bring him back to life. Let's have dinner. It's an amazing moment. Lazarus was dead, his heart beating, organs decomposing. Now he's back. He's alive. It's amazing. And I wonder whether the story stops there, for a couple of reasons. It doesn't tell us the reactions of the people around. Because in one sense, how do you write the emotion, the experience of seeing somebody come back to life like that? I mean, how do you put that down on paper? But I wonder too whether John decides to leave the reactions of the people around out of the story because he's offering you and I, the reader, space for our reactions. Because it begs the question, doesn't it? How do you react to a story like this? How do you respond to a man who raises the dead back to life? Who promises and states and claims that he is the resurrection and the life. That is not a claim you can kind of brush away. That is a claim that needs answering. Jesus is a man who requires a response. And in every encounter so far in John's Gospel, that is the ultimate question, isn't it? How do you respond to Jesus? As we've been meeting Jesus face to face through the eyes of these people, how do you respond to Jesus?